Two key players for Derby County look set to be out of contract this summer, and in my opinion, they need urgently to agree new deal. Derby County have two players on the potential chopping block this summer, which I believe should have new terms signed before we hit the January window. The two players are Curtis Nelson and Kane Wilson, two massively impressive players. Now, in my opinion, I think Kane Wilson may have an optional extension in his contract after he signed from Bristol City, but obviously at this point we cannot be too sure. But for me, you look at the likes of Curtis Nelson and Kane Wilson and the impact they had on Derby County's promotion. You look at the impact they've had so far in this start to the Championship campaign. And yes, obviously Kane Wilson has been a little bit out in the cold due to Ryan Nyambi's form, but when Kane Wilson has been called upon, he's been really, really good in my opinion. Now, obviously, you look at someone like Curtis Nelson coming towards the back end of his playing days, but at 31 years old, I believe he's still got a few years left in him. Would I give him a 3-year contract? Probably not, but do I think there should be terms on the table so that Derby County can move forward and build forward for potential future players? Absolutely. Now, if we do go ahead and look at Curtis Nelson himself, is an absolutely magnificent player in my opinion. He's been really good for Derby County this season, signing on a free transfer from Blackpool at the start of last summer, and he's played 12 matches this year, scoring twice, a 6.72 rating. And I think you look at his performances across the course of this season and they've been very, very consistent. I think the Millwall game, I think it's very harsh to give him a 5.5 rating. I think the Norwich game as well. The Millwall game, the goal wasn't really his fault. He was very, very unlucky in what happened with that one. And obviously you look at the Norwich game where two of the goals we conceded were out of play, and that's obviously disappointing. You go down and look at obviously his per 90 stats, which his goals is really high, which is obviously quite good. And for a defender, especially for one in a Paul Warne system where you've got to take advantage of set pieces, he's certainly been a player that has taken advantage of set pieces on both ends of the field. 52% for aerial duels won, 53% for just normal duels won. And for me, I think he's been really, really good. He's low in terms of dribble in getting dribble past, which is 69.3%, 3.17 recoveries per game. I think he is an absolutely excellent player, and I think if you go back to his League One campaign, you can just see exactly what I'm talking about. He's an absolutely humongous player for Derby County in the defensive end. At 62% for tackles won, 63% for duels won, 64.5% for aerial duels won. Doesn't get dribbled past much. A lot of recoveries, a lot of blocked shots, and this is something which we've seen from Derby County's back four across the course of the last few years. It's putting their body on the line and really making sure that they stop the opposition from scoring. And he was part of the best defence in League One last season. He's part of a really good defence in the Championship right now. I'm not entirely sure where Derby rank for goals conceded. If we go to the league table, where did Derby County rank for goals conceded? 15. So we're quite clearly nowhere near the best, but we're also nowhere near the worst. It's really good performance from Curtis Nelson and obviously the Derby County back four. You can't ignore the importance of Erin Cashin or the importance of a Ryan Nyambi or a Craig Forsyth, but very, very good from Curtis Nelson. I think it's going to be massive to see what he can do going forward. Obviously, in my opinion, I think he should get a new deal. I think it'll probably be a 1 year, maybe a 2-year deal by Paul Warne and the Derby County coaching staff, and I think that would be right. It would take him up to 32, 33 years old, and then we can reassess from there. Obviously, we know Curtis Davis went until the age of 38, 39. We know Phil Jagielka was still playing at 42. I think he scored a goal at 42 for Stoke City. Could be wrong, it might be 41, but he was still very, very impactful. Now the next player is obviously Kane Wilson, and such a versatile player for Derby County, and I think at 24 years old he's only going to get better. Now I do think there's some aspects of his game that he needs to work on, especially in that right back position where I think he certainly needs to be better in a defensive standpoint, and that's something which, in my opinion, he has been working on, and he has been getting better in those situations. But it's one of those for me where he's not quite yet as good in that defensive area, but you don't want to take away from his ability going forwards, and that's something that worries me with Kane Wilson. In my opinion, I think we should see him as a winger rather than as a defender, because ultimately I think he's wasted at right back, and I think he's way too deep. Now, in my opinion, he should be part of our front three, not necessarily from the off, but you see this season he's started 5, played in 8 games, 485 minutes, obviously nowhere near the numbers of that of Curtis Nelson, but he's done a really good job, whether it be coming on off the bench or whether it be starting games. In my opinion, has been really good. And obviously with the loss of Ryan Niambi now, he's probably going to be that first choice right back. You look at Joe Ward, who's picked up another injury, and you look at someone like Kane Wilson, and in my opinion he has to sign a new deal so that we can protect his value, because in my opinion there is value there, whether it be £1 million, £2 million, £500,000. There's value in Kane Wilson, and he was a player who I believe we picked up on a free performance-based deal. Now, I'm not sure what the performance stipulations were. Nobody really spoke about the performance stipulations at the time of him signing, but it's one of those for me where I really think he can have a massive impact on this Derby County side going forward into the future. I think he can help take us forward. You look at someone like Nathaniel Mendez-Lang, who's coming towards the back end of his career. Kane Wilson then has that opportunity to break into that forward line and take that position from him. Will he be able to do it across the course of the next 12 months? Maybe not, but I do certainly believe that he can and he will become one of Derby's first choice in that forward area. Obviously, he's probably going to be the starting right back for this weekend's game versus Stoke City, but I think when it comes to January, I think we're going to see some players leave, and I think obviously Kane Wilson, Curtis Nelson, with contracts coming to a close, they have the opportunity to look elsewhere and discuss with clubs. Obviously, outside, I think it's outside of England. I think they can talk to Welsh clubs, Scottish, Irish, and then obviously the European Americas and stuff like that, because we saw it with Johnny Russell once. I'm fairly sure his contract was coming to a close and he signed a deal elsewhere, and we've obviously bought players in on similar terms. You look at the likes of Graham Shinney. We agreed to sign him in February 1 year. You look at Raul Albentosa, who I believe we agreed a deal with halfway through a season. And it's players, and it's like that. They're the sort of things which worry me. Now, I'm not saying Kane Wilson or Curtis Nelson are going to be on the lips of these European clubs, these Scottish clubs maybe. But it's one of those where you never know who's looking where. You go back a few years and Nottingham Forest sold Arvin Appiah, a young player, to, was it Elmira, for something like £8 or £9 million. And it's one of those where I think if you don't set yourself up in a position where you can regain the money, then we could lose these players. Obviously, Kane Wilson, 24 years old, been with us for a couple of seasons now. I think for me, it'll probably be a 3-year deal for Kane Wilson, but probably 2 with a +1. Now, it's obviously a massive talking point for Derby County fans to look at these contracts and things like that. And also, as you head into that January window, these contract talks need to be getting to a decent standpoint, in my opinion, because you've got to make sure that you can keep these players. If not, you need to start looking. If they're going to move on, you need to know what positions you need to be looking at. And I think a big thing for Derby County in January is shipping off some of the dead wood. Now, I'm not saying it's dead wood as in they can't have an impact. You obviously look at the injury to Ryan Niambi, and that ultimately means that I don't think Joe Ward will go in January unless we can directly replace him. So it's one of those where it's going to be a really, really important time for Derby County, for Paul Warne, for the recruitment staff to see what we can do and how we can pull together some big players to come in. Obviously, we've got to let go before we can bring in. Obviously, Darren Robinson's recently come back from his loan spell, so he can add a body to the first team if necessary. But it's going to be a long few weeks until January. We're at the end of October as I'm recording this. It's going to be a very interesting look at what is going to happen across the course of Derby County over the course of the next few weeks. We're going to try and get back into it. I'm going to stick to simply just a video a day. Try and get a video a day at the minute while I'm still not feeling the greatest. And we'll just see what happens. Going to look into doing some live streams across the course of probably November, December time, but I just want to make sure I'm back in full fitness before I start doing anything like that. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on live streams, stuff like that. Could do it here, over on TikTok, on Twitch, or across all three. We'll just have to see what happens. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Let me know which of these, if you think these two players should sign new contracts or we should look to move on. Obviously hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in my next video. Make sure to go and find me on TikTok, pictured here, and Twitter, pictured here. These are the places where I'll keep you all up to date with all my upcoming videos and my thoughts and feelings around the Formula 1 and Football Week.